I'll just turn on the recording on this side too.
Wonderful. So,
all right.
All are here. So, we'll just start our meetup.
So much production here. Okay, recording's on Teams.
Okay, wonderful. So, all wonderful people are here. Super cool. So I hope, guys, you can see my screen.
Not yet. I see you.
Oh.
Yes, yes.
All right, here comes the screen. Perfect.
Perfect. So, welcome, Assalamu alaikum, ahlan wa sahlan, kaif al-hal, and welcome to the first meetup of Saudi Arabia, Microsoft Excel and Power Platform. And this is one place with infinite solutions. You can connect, you can share, and you can learn. And this is a session which has been recorded, my friends, and you'll find the recording on youtube.com/Excelexciting. So anytime if you have missed out, my friends, you can go and check out over there. Well, this meetup of Saudi Arabia was first born on 13th of December 2019 in person. And I was really excited between the passion I have seen between men and women over here, and they wanted to learn and they were quite eager about that. So we plan to do some more session, unfortunately, because but now we got a great opportunity to connect it in a better and safer platform from anywhere in the world with the greatest experts in the industry who are there. So we'll be running regularly these meetups, and you will see this meetups coming up in the future days. And please make sure that you get connected to the meetup group so you can get the scheduled events, what is coming next for you. Well, just a little bit quick housekeeping, my friends, that to avoid any connectivity issues and let the participants and the other speakers to listen to the speaker without any trouble, just make sure that your mic is muted and make sure that there will be a dedicated time with the presenter to answer your questions. And type your questions on the comment section, chat box, because there are some other experts also in the house today, so they can help you to answer that. And raise up your hands anytime if you have any queries, so we can just let you speak. And if you're facing any difficulty in internet connectivity, make sure that you exit the meeting and rejoin that, so that will solve the problem. And do not download any stuff or watch any videos during the session, because that may interfere your bandwidth and the connectivity. And as I said, this session will be recorded. So that's it. And just quickly, I'll be just telling about myself. I'm Faraz Shaikh. I'm founder of Excelguru.com, Microsoft certified trainer, innovative educator, and YouTuber, blogger, and I run Saudi Arabia Microsoft Excel and Power from Meetup. My mission is to help the community to provide the easiest solution with the Microsoft application so that your life can become easier and quicker. And the passion is to share the knowledge and gain the Microsoft Office application knowledge. And we have some great experts, and it is a great opportunity to learn and gain the knowledge from them. So that was a quick introduction about myself, and I would just like to thank our sponsors, Excelguru and Excelexciting and Excelguru. Thank you so much, Ken Puls, that without your support, without your tenant support, this event wouldn't be possible. Right now, this event which is happening right now is being sponsored by Excelguru and on his tenant, and we are able to see this event and make it happen and make it possible. Thank you so much, Ken. So
no worries, man, no worries.
So it was quick agenda meetup, the meetup agenda that we have a welcome and an overview, and we will see the guest, Ken Puls, Microsoft MVP, who will be talking some great stuff. And then we are going to have a wrap up and we will have a Q&A sessions. So that's a quick one. And guys, if you want to become a superhero, then don't forget, my friends, that there's an event coming up for Global Excel Summit where you can go and register for this one, and you get to get a super jam-packed 17 experts speaking, and they have their master classes. And there are some early pricings by December 23. So make sure that you grab that. And even you can grab an additional 10% discount, which will be like putting the code Faraz-10. So this is just about the speaker. That's me and Ken. We were enjoying the Excel days in Bulgaria, and even we went in Slovenia. So this is a picture we took over there. And I love this green picture. And even the Ken, we had great fun over there. And just to tell you about Ken, he's the president of Excelguru Consulting and Company, which is dedicated in helping the users to get most out of their data. His passion is lies exploring the tools and turning the data, the crap data, or the data into a valuable piece of information. And I would leave the floor to Ken so he can tell more about himself. If I start speaking about Ken, I will take the whole session only just talking about Ken. So, but his recognition and his contribution, he's been awarded as a Microsoft MVP, and he's an MVP since 2006. That's an great honor to have you, Ken, over here and talking and see how we can uplift our skills. I am going to drop these links on the YouTube. It's already there in the YouTube link, and it's already there on the Meetup. So you can connect anytime to Ken on these social channels. So let our hero take the lead. The Ken Puls, build better Excel models faster with Ken Puls. Over to you, Ken.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate that. I got to say, looking at those pictures, yeah, we did. We had a great time over out in Bulgaria and Slovenia last year, and yeah, it's just sad to not be there right now, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But hey, what can we do? So let me go back here and just move all this stuff around so I can see what I'm looking at, get it all in the right spots for me. So hi folks, I am Ken. I am going to turn off my video for this to try and make sure that I've got as much bandwidth as possible to try and send the presentation all the way to Saudi Arabia and back, actually, because I know I've got some people locally that are watching here. So I'm just going to go and turn my camera off and preserve that bandwidth. And Faraz, thanks so much for having me for your first online only event. I know this is something we've been talking about for a long time. Is you getting started with meetups and whatever else, and a real shame that things shut down so quickly after you got started last time. So it's nice that we can get you back up and running and into a virtual world here. So very cool stuff. I'll blast off a really quick slide coverage here. I'm going to do this really quickly because Faraz has already given me a bit of an intro. I am a designated accountant in Canada. I'm a fellow of the Chartered Professional Accountants of Canada. I do have a little website at excelguru.ca where we have a blog and a forum and some help articles and whatnot. And as Faraz mentioned, I'm actually also a Microsoft MVP. I also am one of the founding partners behind skillwave.training, which is where we actually teach you how to build better data models using Power Query, using Power Pivot, and Power BI in order to build up good intelligence models that actually answer your business questions. Among the other things on this slide, though, I am also a software developer and an author. I have written the book M is for Data Monkey, which is widely regarded as the book on Power Query for Excel. I also have written a software called Monkey Tools, which is an add-in for Excel and is going to be the focus of the presentation that we're dealing with today. But I also want to throw out a big acknowledgement to the fact that I don't do this stuff alone here. While I came up with the idea and I've been working on this software for oh man, it's probably about 8 years now, I think. About a year and a half ago, I actually brought someone onto my team. His name is Abdullah Halarbi, and Abdullah is actually with us on the meetup today. He is our lead programmer. He also happens to be from Saudi Arabia originally, so this is kind of a cool thing for him to be part of this meetup as well, and he'll be watching the chat for comments and questions as well if there's any around the actual software itself. So it's going to be a kind of a fun little show here all the way through. So let me go and just, before we dive into looking at how we can actually build better models faster, what I want to do is I want to just talk a little bit quickly about my modeling philosophy and how I sort of look at working with Excel to build data models. So basically, I am, as an accountant, I've been using Excel for a long time in order to go and actually get my business intelligence. So my go-to tool has always been Excel. So I'm going to start there. I'm going to build my data models in Excel. I'm going to get everything working so I understand what's actually going on. That's my primary tool to go to when I actually want to figure out what's happening in my organization. Then what I'll do when I want to share it is I can take those models that are built in Excel and I can publish them directly to Power BI. There's a couple of different options for this in Office 365. You can either upload a workbook so that somebody can see your Excel worksheets and interact with them, or you can go and publish your data model directly to Power BI so that it actually takes the Power Query and Power Pivot side, and then online in Power BI, you can go and you can build more reports there and then share them with your audience. The piece of software that you don't see in this particular chain at this point is actually Power BI Desktop. Now, Power BI Desktop is a fantastic software, but it's actually not totally required if you're building your models in Excel and you're comfortable in building your reports online, because you can actually publish to Power BI just as if you were using Power BI Desktop, which is kind of an interesting thing that a lot of people don't necessarily know. Of course, you can also take your Excel model and import it into Power BI Desktop and then build reports there, and then eventually well, it's full work. And it's what some people do. Some people start in Power BI, some people start in Excel and import to Power BI, and some people take Excel and publish directly to Power BI and skip Power BI Desktop altogether. So for me, I generally tend to work across the top and then down the right-hand side of this diagram. But I also recognize that people will use any part of it along the way. So I just wanted to sort of throw that out as an option if you're not aware of it as to what actually can happen here. Now, talk a little bit about Monkey Tools. So what is Monkey Tools all about? Who's the target audience for this particular software? And this is something that's actually really important to me that, that you understand as we look at this, because the main philosophy behind Monkey Tools is that we actually just help you automate the process of things that you can do manually, right? You can do all of this stuff yourself with Sleuth. There's nothing wrong with that. What we like to do is actually make it faster for you so that these things can actually happen. And at the end of the day, one of the things we want people to know is that our tool does not rely on our tool being installed when you actually send your workbook to somebody else. You can have your developer working with it, and nobody ever has to know that you use our tool. I'm not trying to get something that's installed inside your organization on every desktop. That's not necessary here. Our target audience is Excel users who are building models with Power Query and Power Pivot. Those are the people that we target the most, people that build like I do. We're also targeting people who need to audit their models that they've received from others because they don't necessarily know what's actually inside the data model itself. So what we're looking at is, hey, let's help you build something faster, but let's also help you get some reporting back to understand what's in that file, whether you built it or whether somebody else did. So while we're primarily after Excel users, one of the things that I will give you a demo on later is we can also read information from Power BI models and actually give you some information back around those kind of things as well. So again, primarily our audience is Excel users, but we love people that are actually working with both softwares because that actually, lets you have a tool set that actually talks to everything. Excuse me. Now, full disclosure on the pricing model that we have on this one here, we do have a forever free version of Monkey Tools. We've tried to actually stick a ton of stuff in here so that you'll want Monkey Tools installed even if you don't actually want to pay us. Because I'm an MVP, a lot of that comes from the participation that I actually do in public forums and helping people. So from that point of view, there will always be a forever free version of Monkey Tools that gets installed on your desktop. When you install it, you also get a trial of our Pro license for 2 weeks for nothing. That comes by default when you install it, so you can see all the cool features that are there. Everything works at 100% except for one set of features, which actually on our reporting side, we only report every other row if you're on a trial license. But outside of that, every other feature works. So you can actually get started with the full set of features for nothing right off the bat. And then if you decide to, you can actually get a pro license subscription, and you can find all the details on what that actually looks like over here. And as we go through this, I will call out what's behind the pro and what's behind the forever free versions. And if I don't, you can always throw something in the chat to remind me, and I can certainly call that out. Now, what happens when we actually put this on screen? We get a new ribbon. Sorry, Faraz, do you have a question? I see you're unmuted right now, so just want to make sure that you got the opportunity if you want to interrupt me.
No, no questions.
No? Okay, cool.
Yeah, cool.
So when you install Monkey Tools, what you actually get in Excel is you get a complete ribbon with the Monkey Tools tab here that actually shows these things. And the way that we've actually got this set up is we actually divide Monkey Tools into what we sort of conceptually look at as two different classes of features. We have what we call our convenience features. These guys here are actually features that exist inside the Microsoft Excel program just as is. Essentially, we've reused their buttons. But what we're doing is we're bringing them all onto one tab so that they're in a nice and easy, convenient place to work it and find. The other thing that we've done is we've actually added all of our own features. So everything in green here is stuff that we've actually programmed. These are Monkey Tools features that we do in order to actually help make life easier with your Excel model. So what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be demoing most of these features as we go through here so that you can see exactly how things work and what we're actually doing along the way. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop over to a nice Excel instance over here, and we'll just jump into demos. There's going to be lots of demos today as we go through here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and grab one of my models here. So let me just go and grab this guy right here. We'll grab the simple base with no queries. And what I have in this particular workbook right now is I'm just going to hop to Monkey Tools, and we're going to demo a couple of these convenience features. So let me just jump into the data. It's on the data tab, of course, but I put it in one tab so I don't have to switch around. You'll notice there's no data model inside this file. It's empty. Okay, cool. Meanwhile, I'm going to show the queries and connections pane. Again, I didn't want to have to flip to a different tab to get that, so I'm really lazy, efficient, so got it all in one place. You'll notice there's no queries in this file either. But what I do have is I have 3 Excel tables here, and I need to create a connection for each of these tables. I need to create a calendar table. In this model, I'm going to create a measure table, some measures, in order to be able to go out and actually figure out what's going on with this. So I promised Faraz when we were doing this meetup that I was going to release a brand new feature to Monkey Tools. So last night we actually pushed this out. So if you actually have Monkey Tools, this will now be available in your build if you update. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Query Monkey right here. And right here, there's a new little feature for connecting Excel tables to. When I go and pick that up, it's going to launch a new dialog right here. And this dialog, what it's going to do is it's going to let me go and pick up or make connections to these tables. So what I've done is I've enumerated all the tables in the workbook. You're thinking, okay, Ken, that's cool, but how do I know there's really tables there? Well, if you click on the blue button, it'll actually take you and select the table for you so you can actually see the data that you're looking at. So there's the categories table, the budget table in blue there, and the sales table right over here. So I can actually navigate through the workbook seeing what's going on. Now, if you've ever taken one of my courses at SkillWave, one of the things that you'll know is that we actually really advocate when you're actually loading your data into the data model that you use the concept of setting up a layer of raw data and then staging queries before you load into the data model. And you can actually see that over here is that we're going to be creating for each of these things a couple of different layers of queries. Now, if you don't want that many layers, no big deal. You can just dial this down and you can go directly from the Excel table to the data model, or you can dial it back up. You can even dial down individual tables if you want to see that happen there. You can turn certain tables off and say, I don't want to import this one at all. You can even toggle this and say, you know what, budget, I don't want to load that one to the data model, just create the connection for me. So there's a lot of different options that you actually have in place here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up with these particular layers here in place. And what I'm going to do is I'm also just going to go and rename this because I've noticed that categories is plural and sales is plural, but budget is singular. And I have multiple budgets. So I'm just going to click on this guy here. And I'm going to rename this to budgets. And what that'll do is that'll rename all of these guys here. Now, I don't rename the Excel table. That would be bad. But what I am doing is I'm making sure that my query chain follows the same name. And at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm now going to go and click create. And this is going to go through and it's going to create all of these queries for me and load them all into the data model as appropriate. So here we go. There's categories going through. There's budgets. Now, before this meetup actually happened, I went through and I timed myself manually to figure out how long it would take me to actually go through and create all of these individual queries and data types them properly and all the rest of that kind of stuff. And it took me about 4 minutes. This is done in 14 seconds. Okay, so much nicer along the way here. The other thing that I'm going to show you here, I didn't actually mention, is that you'll notice here that I have the ability to set the data types in the final query only. I'm also going to show you what happens if I come back to this one for a sec. I'm going to do this again. And I'm just going to go and take my budget here. I'm going to do this one. I'm going to turn that off. And at this point, I'm set to replace queries if they exist. So I'm just going to create that, and it's going to go and update those queries again and just sort of make a quick little change to this. It will reload budget for me to the data model. And there we go. The 76 rows are loaded there. It took 7 seconds. Okay, so what actually happened here? Well, if I go and take a look at the data model, we'll jump into manage. What you'll notice here is that I've actually got a couple things, and I forgot to rename my budget this time, so I actually got a second piece. So I was kind of hoping to replace it, not a big deal. But what we're going to do is we're just going to take a look, and you can see that here we go. I've got my categories, I've got my budgets, and I got my sales. So I can just move this around a little bit. I'm going to set this one up. We're going to go category to here, category to here. I'm going to leave this one, and I'm going to get rid of him in a second, actually, but I just want to show you what the difference is between these two queries. So I'm going to close that. Now, I'm going to pop into another feature of Monkey Tools right here. This is called Query Sleuth. We're going to talk more about this a little bit later. But the idea behind Query Sleuth is that I can actually take a look at my queries. So if I double click on sales, this is the chain of queries that leads through from sales. So you can see it starts with Rod. This sales, it goes to Stady, all the M code that goes with it, and we go right up to sales itself. The interesting part around this one here that I want you to notice is that we've actually added a change type step at the end. Notice that it is using a currency data type. Let's go and look at budgets. Budgets is using an int64 type. That's the type for whole number. When you actually take a look, this guy here has decimals on it. This one does not. We like to think that our data type algorithm that we have here is actually smarter than Power Queries because we actually correctly look for dates versus date times. You'll notice Power Query always does date time for dates from Excel. I actually look at it and say, no, these things here are supposed to be dates. We look at how many decimals are actually here and try and set the correct decimal type. It's not going to be whole number or decimal. We actually pick up currency if your numbers are rounded to 4 decimal places or between 1 and 4 decimal places. The difference between budget and staging budgets, notice staging budget here has no data type. In budget, when I actually did this one, I said I want data types on every single step, so it actually types every data step along the way. Okay, so normally I actually set this up to only do the last one. So I'm just going to go back here, and I'm going to take all these budget ones that just confuse things, and I'm going to get rid of them at this point in time. I don't actually need them in my model. I just sort of wanted to demonstrate what the difference was there. Okay. Now, the next piece along the way here that I want to do is I need a calendar table because if I'm reporting on my sales, I've always got to do this based on the actual sales information that we have. I should mention actually. So that feature there, this new Connect Excel tables too, brand new as of last night. This does require a pro license. We figure if we're going to make your life that easy, that you can help us out with the development on it. So it does work under the pro trial for the first couple of weeks for nothing, just so you're aware. All right, let's talk about the calendar table. So I need a calendar table, and what I want is I want to actually use one of the techniques that's in M is for DataMonkey. I want to build a dynamic calendar that always covers the beginning of the year from the earliest date in sales to the end of the latest year that we find in the budgets table. So I want this completely dynamic so I never have to touch my calendar ever again. So I don't have a calendar table in here so far, so I'm going to use Monkey Tools to create one of these too. So here we go. As I say, this is a pattern that you can absolutely do directly manually. I did all this stuff manually beforehand. This took me about 5 minutes to go through and build when I was trying to do this manually. And I actually did just a simple calendar. We're going to do one that's a little bit more complex here. You'll notice we can do 12 month, 445, 454, 13 fiscal periods. I'm going to leave it at 12. What I am going to do is I'm going to set my year end to a custom year end of September 30th, which happens to be the year end for my business. So here we go. We're going to click next. At this point, it gives us a whole bunch of different calendar options. If you were using 445, you would find a period ID column over here as well that you can actually choose from. But in my case, I'm looking at it saying, give me the calendar year, the month of the calendar year, the month name in short format. We've also just recently added ISO week of year and a precise ISO week of year. Now, I don't usually report based on these, but I'm going to leave them in here so you can see what they are. And then I'm going to pick up my fiscal year and my month of fiscal year as well to make sure that I've actually got those guys all set up along the way. Oz, I see you have a question.
Yeah, say, I have heard you and so many others talking about a calendar table, and I have never saw, oh, I need to make a calendar table. What is a situation where a calendar table is needed, and why is it such a big deal?
All right, if you are, great question, Oz. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. So here's the deal. Let me create it, and I'll show you, because this actually lends directly into that. So I'll continue through the creation of it here, and then I'll talk specifically to that when I actually add it to the pivot table.
Okay.
So basically, I'm going to click next at this point. What you'll notice is that we actually come back and say, look, you said you want your earliest date based on sales, your latest date based on budget. We're pretty sure you want relationships for those in your calendar, so we'll go and add those, and then we click create. And at this point, we're going to go through. You can see we've created a couple new queries for the start date and end date. Here comes the calendar down the bottom, and it's now going to start loading into the data model. Again, this process here, if I were carefully following all the recipes that I've got for this thing, would take me somewhere between, if I'm going really fast, 3 minutes, but probably more like 5 to 6 minutes to actually create this thing. And basically what's happened is it's now done. This also gives us some advice back here telling us what we need to do inside the data model. We should be hiding some keys. We should be checking some things around our relationships. But if you know how this all works, you can also check the box, say next time, just close this window. Don't be out about this stuff. Just finish it and be done. What happens is when we can jump over into our data model, you can see that I've now got my calendar table here with all of the different ways that I actually want to report. And if I go over to my diagram view, you can see that my calendar table is already here. It's already related to the data model based on the date columns that we actually have in place. So this is good, nice and handy, quick and easy. One thing I wish we could do, there's a couple of things I wish we could do, but one of them is I'd love to be able to just right click and hide these. If I could ask the Excel team for one thing for Christmas, it would be the ability to hide and unhide columns in the data model using code. We just don't have an opportunity to do this. Unfortunately, there's no API for it. But I'm going to get rid of those. That's just a modeling thing. And then I'm going to hop over to the calendar table, and I'm going to grab, and this is something, Oz, just for reference, that you can't do with a regular pivot table. I'm going to grab my month short, and I'm going to sort it, and I'm going to sort this by my fiscal, or by my month of fiscal year. Okay, and we're going to say okay. Again, I wish I could automate that process for you, but unfortunately I can't. Now, I'm now going to say, okay, cool, I've got all my tables in the data model that I need, so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to start creating a pivot table. So here we go. We've got a new button. If you don't have all four of these options, this is brand new inside the beta version of Office 365. It used to be that it was just insert pivot table. If you hit a blank cell, it would go from the data model. We now get to choose. So I'm going to say from data model. And at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start setting up my pivot table a little bit. So I'm going to go to categories, and I'm going to go and put my month short on rows. So the very first thing that you're going to notice here is that my months are now sorting October, November, January, February, March, and so forth. So Oz, here's the point of your question is, why would I need a calendar table? Well, the reality on this one here is that if I use anything other than the December 31st year end for my reporting, I can't have it sort correctly in the data model. I have to have something that actually sets it up to sort properly. So you need to have that. The second side of it is that if I want to filter both my sales and my budget, I must have a calendar table, because you never want to actually filter from your fact table, the table that actually has your sales in. So if you're using a standard pivot table, this might not be a big deal. But as soon as you get into the data model, you need to separate that calendar table out, because it is a filter that should be able to filter multiple tables. And it's just a big data modeling component that goes along with the ground with this. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab class. I'm going to throw that on columns, because I want to break my pivot table looking up this way. But what I've just realized here is that I don't have any measures. So I'm going to go create some. Now, for most people, they'll jump over to Power Pivot, they'll go to measure, new measure, and they'll start writing formulas. But here's one of the cool things that I love about Power Query is that in Power Query, I don't need to write formulas. I just click buttons to make things happen, and it writes the formulas for me. So now here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this measure monkey. We're going to go to basic explicit measures. Now I'm going to pick up from this one. I'm going to start with this. I'm going to grab my sales, and I'm going to grab amount. And what you'll notice is it immediately comes back and says, okay, I'm going to give you a sum. This will name it by sum of amount. It's going to store it on the sales table. Okay, all good so far. And here is the DAX formula. Now, if you've worked with Power Pivot or any pivot table, you'll know that you can just drag amount into the values area, and boom, it's going to make it happen. Away you go. But that creates what we call an implicit measure. I want explicit measures. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create myself an explicit measure, but I actually want one that counts my transactions. So I'm going to go to count, and I'm going to choose to count all the rows. You'll notice that the formula has been updated here to count rows. I'm going to go and call this one transactions. There we go. And I'm going to format this as a whole number. While I'm here, though, I also want to show you something that we're actually proud of that's pretty cool here. If this was a financial setup that we were looking for and I wanted a currency, we actually added the ability here to go and actually set up your currencies here. So basically what we've done is we've picked the top 10 most traded currencies in the world here, plus we've actually added all of the different sort of monikers down here for different currencies. So if I was looking for the Saudi Arabia currency, I could actually go and set this as a SAR, and it would actually show up on my pivot table as that. Outside of this, you've got a none, which is my personal favorite. Up the top here where we have the $sign, this one here is smart, reads from your Windows control panel and actually gives you the value that is your default currency indicator. Outside of that, you can actually lock it in with one of the 10 most traded currencies in the world using these guys here. Now, for me right now, though, this one here is just going to be a whole number. We actually record your defaults for this so that next time you do this, it hopefully learns and gets a little bit smarter as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go and say, let's create a measure on this one here. It's going to create it, and it tells me up the top here it's successfully created. I'm now going to hit exit, and if I go and take a look at my sales table, I can put transactions right on there. I now have my transaction count. Now, Christian, I see your comments in the window here about doing grouping these guys into folders for your queries. 100% agree with you, buddy. And if I had the ability, that would have been done like way long ago. Unfortunately, there is absolutely no ability with the API sets that we have inside Excel today in order to be able to actually add, modify, remove, or do anything with folders for Power Query. You have no idea, dude. I'm holding my heart right now. It gets me right here because this is something that I would absolutely love to have. So, yeah, kills me. Absolutely kills me. All right. Yeah, it is too bad. 100% agree. Let me show you something else. I realize that there's something else that I want to do. There's a lot of people who love storing their measures on a dedicated measure table. I'm going to be honest, I'm not one of them. But if you were, you can come back and say, look, I'd like to add a measure table to my model. There we go. Once again, we'll just click OK. And at this point, the measures table gets added. Now, it does come back and say, look, we just need you to do one thing because we can't automatically hide columns for you. I need you to jump over here, and we'll go to diagram view. And we'll just right click and hide this column here. Okay, so that makes it go away. This turns it into an official measures table. And now I'm going to create a couple more measures. But this time I'm going to use a different feature. I'm going to use our multiple explicit measures, or our measure monkey, multi-measure monkey, we like to affectionately call them that. And it comes back and it actually gives it says, look, these are all of the fact tables that you have that we've programmatically identified. We believe that the columns you want to aggregate are in this area. So we're going to say next. And it says, okay, here, what would you actually like to set up? So I'm going to set this one up. I'm going to call this one budget. we'll notice right now the default currency, because this contains whole numbers, is actually showing me a currency with whole numbers, but I'm just going to go and change that to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The currency here, again, the indicator does read from your control panel to give you your local currency indicator. And then we're going to grab this one here, and I'm going to call this one, actually, I'm going to call this sales dollars and budget dollars. Just want to make sure those are nice and clean. And if I wanted to, I could also go and add another aggregation. Even here, I could actually add my count rows for sales. I'm going to get rid of this one, though, because I already have it. And at this point, I'm now going to go and say create. Now, one thing I didn't call out here is that this one actually, now that there's a measures table in place, actually explicitly puts these onto the measures table by default, although you can actually change where they go by default as well. If I go back to my pivot table over here, you'll now notice my measures table has my sales and my budget. There we go. They're actually observing the formats that I've set. I could even take these guys down, move them down into this area. I've now managed to go and actually build out my entire data model on this one, just using a point and click, 100% UI driven, no code experience, end to end on this one here. One more thing I just want to show here, because again, I think this sort of speaks a little bit to Oz's question. I'm going to go and add my year to my pivot table just above my month short. And now what you can see is that my 2018 sales for October, November, December, January, and then if I move into 2019, my fiscal year is all sorting correctly here. So everything's looking pretty good along the way here. So I'm happy with the way that's all sort of laying out and showing up. So that's the quick get started thing with Monkey Tools. A couple of different pro features we actually used along the way. We used the Connect Excel tables, Add Measure Table, and the Calendar Monkey, all to make this job a little bit faster. I should point out that the Measure Monkey, basic, explicit, and multiple explicit measures, these guys are not pro features. They are free forever features. So if you want to get started with quick explicit measures, think of them kind of like smart measures or for Excel. You can do that. We've got the idea to add a bunch more stuff here that probably will fall into the pro features, but these guys are under a forever free license. End to end, if I go through and build this entire data model out using Monkey Tools, it takes me less than 3 minutes. If I try and go and build this thing manually, doing all of the queries, all the measures, and getting all that stuff ready, in my test, I believe it takes at least 10 minutes. So, we cut the time down drastically in place here. Plus, we end up getting explicit measures and proper connections and dynamic calendar tables, all for, nice and quick and easy clicks along the way. So that's the first part of the Monkey Tools demo there, and there you go. So hopefully that makes some sense along the way. Let me go and show you, and I haven't seen any new questions come in, so that's cool. If there are more, please fire them into the chat. And Faraz, if any come in on Zoom, let me know about that too. I'm happy to take those and talk about those as well.
Sure. Okay.
All good so far?
Yeah, all good so far.
Excellent. All right. So let's talk about the next feature that I want to sort of show you. Again, another little convenience feature. This one falls. There's two different places that we actually sort of look at with this one. But for those readers who are familiar with M is for Data Monkey, one of the things that we actually have inside M is for Data Monkey is way down near like chapter 24. So it's like right near the end of the book. But one of the most powerful things I think of that we set up in that book for Power Query is the ability to create a function that reads a parameter from an Excel table, not a true parameter, but we predated the real parameters, but I actually prefer these anyway. And it involves setting up a very specific table inside your Excel workbook, plus a very specific query in order to be able to read to it. Now, that was cool. Inside the book, in the example files, we gave you the text file that has the function. We gave you all the instructions on what to do, but it still takes a couple of minutes to get it all set up. I'm way too lazy. I'm inefficient for that. So I added a button here that when you go and click on this, boom, there we go. The table's been set up. The function is already here. And at this point, it's even got the function all in place with an if error statement says this workbook needs to be saved. This will now return the file path that you actually need for your file, so you can actually set up your solutions to dynamically read from the file path when you send them to different people. This does not work for Power BI. Okay, just be clear on that. Because it doesn't have the ability to pull the file path into something. But if you need this, it's not just about file paths. There's all kinds of stuff you can do. This is super easy to inject this. And this is one of those forever free functions. when you sort of look at what's above the line here, all these guys are free. I also have a smart folder function. This one here will allow you to smart switch between a SharePoint folder and a local folder. What happens here, though, when you click on this one, is it actually injects the function, and then you have to go and read the documentation in the user guide on how to actually hook that up into your stuff. If you don't want to do that, we actually have something here called the new smart folder query, and what this guy does is this guy actually hooks up everything you need, so that basically all you need to do is control, or you need to do one setting on your privacy for it, and then basically at that point it will actually smart switch between your folders for you automatically based on what's actually in the worksheet cell. So that's fully contained inside the documentation, and there's lots of good stuff there. We've also added the get ISO week function. Again, this will inject it. This part's free, and then you have to add it to your calendar table by just invoking a custom function. Nice and easy, but we wanted to make sure that you had the ability to do these things, but we just make it super easy in these parts, and that's why that part's under the Pro license. All right, I think I'm going to, let me see here. What can I do with this guy here now? I think I'm going to skip on the SharePoint thing, only because we've got a lot of bandwidth going on this one. Well, maybe not. Let's go and do this here. Let me close this guy here. And I'm going to start this whole example from scratch here, and we'll build this guy up. We'll see if everything works correctly here for me today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and say, let's do a file save as, and I'm just going to go and save this over one of my Monkey Tools demo files. I've got a smart folder live here. We will demonstrate how this one works. So I'm going to save it right over top of this, so you can see now we've got a blank workbook in place. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Query Monkey, and I'm going to insert the new smart folder query. And it says, what would you like to call it? I'm going to call it files list. Say OK. You can see that one of the challenges we have with this particular function in Office 365 is it comes back and it always gives me the SharePoint route to this particular guy here. So that's a bit of a shame. I prefer the local path, but what can you do, right? So what you can see is my files list over here has come back, and it says, look, there's a formula firewall issue in this particular case. We need to know about your data source. This is something I unfortunately can't automate, but if I go and double click on this and go and take a look at what's actually going on inside, you'll see that it comes back and it's going to say, look, we need to know a little bit about your data privacy. So I'm going to continue, and I'm going to say, let's set my current workbook, like my SharePoint site, to organizational. Notice that I'm not ignoring privacy, and that's actually really the point of this, is that this will work even with privacy enabled. We just have to set this to say, let's set this consistent with what my SharePoint site is inside my organization. And at that point, you can now see it comes back and it's pulling all of the information from my SharePoint folder. Why this is super important is because if you've ever worked with SharePoint, one of the things that you'll know is that in order to connect to the SharePoint site, you cannot feed it all of this stuff, all this information to get to the subfolder. You have to go up to everything before this, like shared documents. You got to give it that, and then you got to drill down into these folders. We actually built a function that makes your life easy in that case. So you can feed it the full URL. We break it apart, put it back together correctly, and then we'll show you what the subfolders are based on where you actually started. What's really cool about this is that I can now go and say, let's do a close and load here, actually. I'll do one more thing, actually. I'm going to go right-click, choose to reference this, and I'm going to just keep a couple of columns on this one here. So we're going to grab that one, and I'm going to go right-click and remove other columns. There we are. Awesome. And now I'm just going to go with a close and load to, actually, I think I'm going to do one more thing. Let me just step back on this. I'm going to go and grab all the stuff that's in the root folder here. So we'll get rid of all the subfolder data. Just make this a little bit shorter. So if we come down here, there we are. I'm going to go close and load to, and I'm just going to load this to a table down here below this worksheet. Come on. There we are. And we'll let that one actually run. So here it comes. Bingo. All right, cool. So you can see that we've got data all the way up to row 27 right here. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to say save, and I'm going to go and say file close. And at this point in time, I'm just going to let actually sync back to SharePoint. I want to make sure that I've got a green check mark here to make sure that it's actually everything's all done correctly, the way that we've got it all set up. So come on, do your thing. Let's go. I hate waiting for my computer. It always takes so long for things to sync back and forth to SharePoint. Come on. And this is one of those challenges when you're working with these things and when it wants to play slowly. Okay, I see that my cloud is turned off over here, so hopefully that means that this is all good. Oh boy. SharePoint demos, always good. Okay, so this one looks like it has done some syncing on this one here. Well, let's give it a shot. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go through and I'm going to pause the syncing on my SharePoint here for 2 hours. And once that pause is not syncing anymore, I'm going to go and double click on this. If everything is working the way that I'm hoping that it will be working right now, fantastic. It comes back with the local file path for what's actually going on in this case here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go right click and refresh. And what you can see is that this actually grew. And the reason it grew is because I've opened up the local file, it's actually showing me the temp file. I haven't actually filtered this one out. So you can see that I'm using the same query both locally, and if I go back to actual SharePoint, I'm actually pulling from the SharePoint site without having to actually switch back and forth and make changes. So this is kind of a handy little thing along the way in order to make this stuff work. All right, so I'll go and turn this back on now. I'm going to close this file off, and then I'm going to jump into some of the other ones as well. So that's the smart folder query, a handy little thing if you've ever been in that situation where you're trying to actually get these things to do some certain things, and work back and forth, and you find that you are synced to OneDrive, and that ends up becoming a problem for that technique. We've got that one solved, and it's all documented again inside our documentation. Let's take a look at this. Next feature here, this is what we call the Destination Sleuth. The Destination Sleuth is a handy little function here where I've got some information inside this workbook. I'm just going to go to Monkey Tools and I'm going to show you from my queries here what I actually have. In this one, I've actually used Monkey Tools to go and create a whole bunch of different calendar tables. I've got some fact tables here, all nicely organized into folders, which I had to do manually. Sorry, Christian. And then I've got a few other queries down the bottom here, including this one called Start 364. And there's one row loaded on this. So I'm going to go and take a look at where it is because I can't really tell. It just says it's loaded, but where is it? So I'm going to go to Destination Sleuth. And what Destination Sleuth does is it actually pulls up a color-coded dialog that allows you to go in and actually see what's going on in these areas. So I can look at Start 364, and because it's green originally when I didn't have it selected, that means it's loaded to the data model. I don't need this loaded to the data model. I want this as connection only. So I'm going to set this up as connection only and change the load destination. It tells me it's going to be removed from the data model, obviously. I mean, that's what I wanted it to do. And now, at this point in time, it's now been removed. And if we come down and look, you can see Start 364 is connection only. Oh, cool. What if I wanted to say, let's load this to a table on a new worksheet. And I want to name the worksheet after the query. Now, in fairness, Microsoft just recently added the ability that when you create a new Power Query in Office 365, it now actually doesn't name it or put it on sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3 anymore. It actually finally names them after the query. It never happened. We beat them to that. But now if I go and say, okay, cool, let's go and do a load destination, you'll notice that Start 364 has now loaded. There's the data on the worksheet. We also have the ability to say, look, you know what? I actually don't want to do that. I really wanted this to be connection only. But not only do I want this as connection only, I'd like you to delete the host worksheet that it lives on. So make this worksheet go away. So we can go and say, let's update that. It's going to take away that worksheet and set it back to connection only. Why you care about this is because I do something slightly different than what Microsoft does, is that normally when you want to go and change one of these guys here, we have a whole bunch of calendars here. They're all loaded as connection only calendars. I want all of these loaded to the data model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select them all. I'll just make sure these are selected, even though they were gray, this would have still worked. I'm going to hit load destinations. And at this point in time, what's going to happen is it's actually going to go through and it's going to load each one of these guys to the data model individually. Now, full disclosure on this one, and again, this one drives me a little bit crazy because, again, we don't have control over these folders. Because these are connection-only queries, they actually truly need So the query, the original query has to be deleted and then can't put it back in a folder that it was supposed to be in. That drives me a little bit nuts. Again, I would love to have that ability to actually put these in the folders, but the key part here that I want you to recognize is that instead of being in a workflow where you have to change one, wait for it to finish, change another one, wait for it to finish, change another one, wait for it to finish. So you spend a lot of time watching your computer waiting for things to be done. I can set this up, walk down the hallway and go get a coffee, and when I come back, it's finished, which makes my life a lot better. So there you go. That's just a nice little handy time-saving feature here for working with different queries. Again, I'll show you really quickly our next little feature here, Query Sleuth. We're really proud of this one here. This is actually a super useful form for us because it allows us to do a lot of things. I can double click on my calendar 364 and I can actually look at inside the legend here. I can see the entire chain of queries that are actually related to each other. We've got a lot of cool stuff that we have inside this. Like, for example, I can show you, we actually indent your M code and colorify it. I can come back and show you what it looks like in an unindented format. So this is a little bit closer to what you would see inside the Power Query editor. But we also highlight precedent queries. Calendar 364 is a precedent query that actually loads to the data model. So calendar 13x4 is actually pulling from this one for some reason. Okay, now I don't remember why I set it up that way, but it is. And now I know. If I look at calendar 364, it says, hey, you made some changes to 13x4. Do you want to discard them? I'll say no. And this is actually, this was totally Abdullah's idea. We actually added a tabs user interface in here so you can make changes to multiple queries in this. Why do you care about making changes to multiple queries? Well, because we have an update button. What that means is if you need to make a quick change to your M code, you no longer need to go and find the Power Query or find the data tab, go to Get Data, show the Power Query editor, go into the Power Query editor, select the query, go to Advanced Editor, make your change, hit OK to come back out here. You can just pull this up, make the change, hit Update, boom, you're good to go. And you can actually start making your updates in your code as you want to. I'm going to flip these back into the indented version again so we can see this. I can't stand reading my M code when it's not indented anymore. And you'll notice that we can see there's a couple of connection-only queries that are used as precedents inside this. All of the M code is displayed here for you as you take a look through things. So really, really handy thing. You can look at this as precedents. You can look at it as dependents. So if we want to discard all these, yeah, that's fine. This shows you the dependent views on these guys here, so we can actually trace it from start 364. Where do you go? So this is all the calendars that it feeds into. There's all kinds of cool stuff that you in this one. The color coding and hiding legend options. These guys, some of these are disabled in the Pro tool, but outside of that, all of the functionality you see here, except for the color, is actually included in the free version. So that's kind of a nice little feature as well, except for the update. You can't update unless you're on the Pro. So that's our Query Sleuth. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up another little file here. We're going to look at the next button across, which is called Time Sleuth. And on Time Sleuth, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this. So we're going to jump into Query Sleuth again. And I'm going to show you a couple of individual components here. Inside M is for Data Monkey, we actually wrote a function and distributed it called PQVLOOKUP. And the whole concept behind PQVLOOKUP is it was supposed to emulate the VLOOKUP function in Excel for either an approximate or an exact match. Now, the challenge with this one here is that it turns out that this is actually a really inefficient function to run. And one of my friends actually came back and put out a much more efficient version for this. His name is Oz, and he even happens to be here right now. Thanks, Oz, for this one. So we totally ran with that. And what we've done is we've actually gone in, if I go and take a look at my precedents on this, is we've actually built a different version of this. So the original PQVLOOKUP is in a completely different format. What I want to show you here is I want to show you the difference between these two things. This is what we call an unbuffered version, which is using the PQVLOOKUP function. Okay, so and actually, I'm just going to turn off one of my features because I was missing some queries. These guys here were hidden because I was only looking at my endpoints. That was bothering me. So the PQVLOOKUP, what we're doing is we're taking this lookup table, we're feeding it the data table, and then we're doing our PQVLOOKUP against it. This is the buffered version. The only difference between these two guys here, when you flip back and forth, is actually what's happening here. We're doing a table.buffer on the lookup table to try and speed up the unbuffered version. And then we've got this other version over here, derived from Oz's, which is called a user interface driven piece here as well. The key difference I'm looking at, table.buffer, no table.buffer, everything else in these two queries is nice and easy. Now I challenge you, if you're working through the query editor, to be able to see things that quickly using the standard Excel editor. And again, remember, all of this you can see, even if you don't have the color, for nothing. Now here's the deal. We're going to go into our time sleuth over here. And what I want to do is I actually want to run some comparisons between these two guys. So I'm going to grab the buffered and the unbuffered queries here, and I'm going to chart the variation. I'm going to do this over 3 trials, and I think I'm going to double it to time the effective privacy on this as well. So there's an effect that you can actually deal with where you turn this off, and it will actually potentially speed things up. So I'm going to run a detailed refresh all on this. And what's going to happen right now is that this is actually a very rudimentary timer, but essentially what we do is we go through and we individually refresh the individual queries. Oh no, I did the all. I did not mean to do the all. This is going to take way too long. I meant to do the selected. I always get that one backwards. So what this is going to do is it's actually going to go through and it's going to run a total of 6 individual trials across the workbook here in order to check what's going on for the timing. What we do is we actually refresh each individual one as we go along. You know, Abdullah, I'm thinking we really need to add a little box on that when somebody's got multiple queries selected and they hit detailed refresh all. We should actually be throwing up a message that says you've got a couple of different, you've selected individual queries. Are you sure you meant to refresh all? Because that is, I burn myself on this regularly. All right, so at any rate, what it's doing is it's running the refresh on each individual query. We don't have the ability to time the refresh of the actual steps themselves, but we're actually tracking the individual refresh time as well as what the cumulative refresh time is. And then when we go through, what we're going to do is we're going to actually create a chart at the end of all this stuff to show what the time differences are between these things. Yeah, Faraz, you know, or stop the query is a great idea on that. Unfortunately, interrupting a running process is challenging, and that's something else that we've actually looked at as well. Is how do we let it go? So rather than shoot my Excel dead, I'm actually going to let this one go, and I'm just going to sort of talk through this thing. The unfortunate part is there is a couple of queries in this one, or there are a couple of queries in this one that will take a little bit longer to run. But you know what? At least it's going to give us a really good look at what's actually going on inside this model and why you don't want to use the unbuffered version of the PQB lookup. Although, to be honest, you can actually already see what's happening here. The buffered is going in 1.6 seconds. Oz's method, the user interface driven method here, 0.2 seconds. I mean, you know, why do we recommend the method that we learned from Oz? Well, that pretty much tells you there, right there. And then this was the original version that we released inside MS for DataMonkey before we learned about all this stuff. It's telling us an awful lot of information around this stuff. So you can definitely see what's going on through this. The other thing that I found fascinating about this, as a bit of a data geek on these ones here, is that there's some components that are going on inside this with the user interface driven between, are we landing, the UI driven is landing in an Excel table. The UI driven DM is landing in the data model. Notice how it's slower to land to the data model than it is to land to an Excel worksheet. And then if you actually land your tables in a compound scenario, which is where you're actually loading them to both the data model and to the worksheet in one query, it's ridiculously slow, like way more than double, which is absolutely crazy. So this is some of the interesting stuff that we actually learned along the way as we were playing around that I didn't know until I actually started testing this. And I know when I went back and ran through this stuff, you know, I ended up sending something into the Microsoft team saying, this is really curious. Why is this? And I know it got flagged as a bug. It does not look like it's actually been fixed. The other thing that's really, really important to be aware of here, well, there's a couple of different things, but the challenge with a Power Query refresh is that Power Query is a single-threaded engine. What that means is that whenever a refresh chain is farmed out, it's farmed out to a specific thread in your computer. Now, my computer has 8 different cores that it runs on, which means that when query 1 is sent out, the system looks for whatever the most available core is and puts it there. When query 2 is sent out, so think about buffered being the first one, UI driven being query number 2, that's the complete chain for it. It might go to a different core. that core may not be as busy. If, you know, in one instance, it might hit actually feeding the teams. Up because it was doing a Windows update when I was doing this kind of stuff, right? So this is why we actually recommend that you do this over multiple times. You need a minimum of 3 to get this chart, because this is actually a box and whisker chart that's showing you what's going on inside inside these. The X is the mean. You've got your
it's 9 o'clock
middle, or your middle 2 quartiles here for what's going on. But the more things that you run, typically if you run between 5 and 10 refreshes, you get a pretty good idea as to what's going on with the variation. The big thing that I want you to recognize, if we go and take a look at the buffered and the unbuffered versions on these, you can see that the buffering of the scenario that I worked with is faster. Here's another weird thing that we unfortunately can't actually automate on the thing, because Microsoft hasn't given us a way to do so. I can't actually get my legend to show up. It just, for whatever reason, doesn't show. So unfortunately, this part you actually have to add yourself. So we'll put that on the bottom. Here's when privacy is turned off. Notice how much faster the buffered goes. In the case of an unbuffered one, for some reason, it actually runs a little bit slower in these cases. But let's go and take a look and put these things back. In most cases, what you'll notice is that user interface driven, when you've got privacy off, it runs faster. I'm going to drive in just on this one here. So this is Oz's method. Notice how much faster it goes with privacy turned off. On the other hand, you got to be a little bit careful about that. You need to know why you're turning privacy off, because there are potential implications around that. But it's kind of a cool little timer just to help give you an idea as to what's going on inside the performance of your model. This turns out this is a pretty popular feature that people really enjoy using. I'll show you, I've got a few different charts. This one here, when I ran it, I actually ran this over 5 trials. There was one, for whatever reason, where this hit a different core here. And it's got a massive amount of time. Yeah, Oz, no, really, this is why this was a huge one. You had no idea this was such a big deal. It's huge. Like I said, dude, that's why we were celebrating, and why I keep giving you a hat tip on this kind of stuff, because I know you love hat tips. Well, you love hats anyway. So anyhow, so yeah, there we go. That's our timer. One thing I should throw out with the timer, we can only time queries that load to places. We cannot time connection-only queries. So if you've got all connection-only queries, it won't show up. You need to actually have those guys showing inside your stuff before we can do it. Okay, let's talk about another feature here. We're going to go and take a look at, this is what we call our pivot sleuth. What I've got is I've got a couple of different tables here. I'm going to show you my data model. I'll show you a nice little look at what's going on inside this. So it's a beautiful looking data model. There's nothing wrong with this. Well, there is, but there's nothing really wrong with it. It's all set up nicely. Categories linked to category. We can see our dates are linked to date. There is nothing wrong with the shape of this data model at all. However, well, here's all the source data. You've seen that before. When I go and take a look at my pivot table, though, I'm getting this crazy relationship between tables may be needed error, and I don't know why. This drives me nuts. You can also see that I've got budgets showing up for things that I'm not sure I should actually have budgets showing up for in this case. Why am I getting a grand total here? There's some weird stuff going on in the pivot table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this with our pivot sleuth. And what Pivot Sleuth does is it comes back and it says, okay, here are all of the 4 fields that go with your pivot table. And then these are for slicers and timelines. Okay. So here's the deal. What's going on? Well, if I look at sales category, it actually gives me a lot of verbiage around what's happening. Now, you do need to understand a little bit about dimensional models to understand what's going on inside this. But basically what it's telling me here is that this field can't filter our budget, which is over here. Okay, nice and simple. Can't be filtered by sales category. This guy also gives you a little bit more information. It says, look, you're actually using something that probably is going to cause you a problem at some point in time. You shouldn't be doing this. What it's actually advising you to do is say, don't use sales category from the category table over here. We should be using categories category. So if I go and take category from my sales table off, and then put categories from my category table on, you'll notice that the pivot table works beautifully. And now when we come back to Pivot Sleuth, everything's good. There's nothing wrong with it. So this tool is to help sort of diagnose what's going on. That's a simple one. What happens if we get into something that's a little bit more complicated? Well, I'm going to go and I'm going to get rid of this guy here. Let's go and pick up this guy here. So this one's going to be a measure table is the next one that we're looking at. Awesome. Same looking data here, but in this case, we've created a separate measures table. You guys saw me do this before. No big deal, right? So first off, let's go and take a look. We've got any relationships maybe needed. Now, the overall structure of this, there's actually nothing really wrong with it, but why are we getting this message? All the numbers look like they're working correctly, and they actually are. So how come the message? So if we hit it with Pivot Sleuth, it'll come back. That one showed up behind for me today. That one's fun. There we go. We've got a couple of different red error messages here, and it tells me it's got no relationship field and cannot filter, right? Meanwhile, over here, we've got some information that's telling us that this is not, or this also can't be filtered by these things. But there's a really, really important part that we've identified, measures the disconnected table. Your measures are most likely calculated correctly, but they always cause this particular problem to be displayed. If this table is intended to be a measures table, flag it as such by hiding all of the unaggregated columns on the table. I wish I could hide and unhide columns for you automatically. As I say, if I could ask for one thing for Christmas from the Excel team, this would be it, because I could do so much with this. But what you'll notice is that if I come in here, right-click and hide from client tools, and come back to Excel, boom, that message goes away. There's no other change. It's now flagged this as an official measures table with the icon up the top. Everything works beautifully. Let's go look at issue number 2. Because on issue number 2, everything looks great, but I've got crazy grand totals that are going sideways all the way through this model. No message, though, about any problems. Pivot Sleuth says, hang on a second, I think I see something that's not right. So in this case, we can see budget year. It says budget year is a fact table. You should not be using columns from a fact table in a dimensional area. This is a fact area. Everything else in here is a dimensional area. So if you know your dimensional modeling, you hopefully understand why this is the case. If you don't, basically what we do tell you is that you shouldn't be using this column here. We should be doing something else. Now, longer term, we will probably look at a way to say, can you fix this for me? Because in this case, we totally could. Likewise, we've got the same problem over here. Sales is a foreign key. Now, I actually may not know about this one and how to actually fix this one, because this one has a separate column. So I might not be able to do this. This one, though, definitely. I know it's a foreign key. We should really be replacing this with the primary key. So here's what we're going to do. The first thing, we're going to take year off of the budget table. So I was back to your question again on why do I need a date table? I'm putting year on my budgets here. It's going to screw things up because that's a fact table. I should be using year from here. That is actually going to work better. If I go back to Pivot Sleuth now, it will no longer be flagging that as an issue. But I still have an issue with my sales category from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to follow the advice that was in that dialogue. I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to say, grab all of these fields and hide them. Grab all of these fields and hide them. We should be using category from the categories table, date from the calendar table, amount is summarized in the measures we have over here, date again from here, category from here, year, we shouldn't be using this one because we have a year over here that's based on the date. And now when we go back, it automatically removes the invalid field from the pivot table. You cannot in Excel put a hidden field on a pivot table. And what I can do is I can come back and say, I really wanted my categories, put it here. I'm now down to the pivot table the way it should be looking. And Pivot Sleuth says, it's all good. Okay, so this is a nice little tool to help you sort of, build some things up and actually get this stuff working, properly. I want to show you one more of these guys here. This is a much more complex model. And there's going to be all kinds of weird stuff going on inside this one. It's got a relationships maybe needed error. If I go and hit this with Pivot Sleuth, you'll notice that there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on inside this thing. There's disconnected tables. There's all kinds of jazz going. So we could obviously go and play around and sort of see some, how that would affect it. I'm not going to do that right now. I just want you to know what an interface looks like when it starts going through and looking at it. All right. Let me go and close this guy out here. I want to move into another file here. I think we're going to move into this guy here called DAX Sleuth. So we have a Pivot Sleuth that has all kinds of cool stuff in it. We also have this thing called the DAX Sleuth. We basically divide our things into two different categories. We have our monkeys. Monkeys build things. And we have our sleuths. A sleuth is an English word for detective, so it actually looks for things. What you'll see in this case is our DAX Sleuth, and in our DAX Sleuth, we have a whole bunch of information. Yellow fields are explicit measures that have been written that have not been that are not included as a child measure in something. Okay, they've got no children. We have the calculated columns that have been built in the model. Ooh, evil calculated columns. Don't ever want to use those. We've got orange fields. These ones are implicit measures where somebody's just dragged the units column and thrown it at the bottom of the pivot table. Even though this guy here has been removed and has not been used in the model, it's still hidden and shows up in your data model. So if you really want to clean things up, you need to hunt these down manually and get rid of them. In addition, we got a bunch of green fields. What are the green fields? Well, the green fields, if I go and double click on burgers sold all time, show me the lineage of my DAX measures. Notice burgers sold is referring to burgers sold right here. I can click on it. I can see what's going on in this. I can actually see that we've got some sales units down in this case here. Now, this is kind of interesting too. Sales units is here, sales units is here, of course. This is being used as a child. This one's the master. It doesn't really matter. The question that you might have though is, where have I used it? So right over here, pivot table 1, pivot table 2, pivot table 3. I can actually walk through my workbook and see exactly which pivot tables I put these on. We also pick up pivot charts, OLAP formulas, and named ranges, although we can't select your named range for you. What if I wanted to do something like this? I look at burgers sold and I say, that's really cool. I would like to see what happens if we take sales units and bring it back in. I'd like to flatten this measure out. I click flatten and it will actually bring it in a nested calculate so I can see the entire measure all in one place. That's kind of nice. I want to get rid of that for a second and jump over here. I'm super happy with burgers sold, but I need to create a new measure for draft beer. Well, no problem. Duplicate. I'm going to call this one draft beer. Actually, let's call it draft sold. That's probably a better name. So draft sold, okay. Oh, I've already gotten draft sold. Well, I guess in that case, let's do a duplicate. Let's make this one canned beer sold. There we go. Better. And it's now going to go and it's going to add canned beer into my list of queries here. So here's my canned beer sold. You'll notice that it brings it over. It's still got a precedent. All I need to do at this point is come into this particular area here, and I need to update this to canned beer and say update. Yes, we are actually writing the DAX measure back into the model. It is now there. So if I wanted to go to a pivot table, let's go and see where my draft sold is used. It's used on pivot table 2. There we go. That's cool. So on my pivot table 2 here, I'm just going to go down and take a look. Here is my canned beer sold. I'm just going to go click it and boom, there we go. My canned beer sold is there. It picks up the same format as the measure we duplicated. So you just have to give it a name. It'll tell you if you've already got one there, and then just sort of update the formula to do the things that you want to do with that. So kind of a cool little thing there as well to play around with. Now, I'm now going to run another feature. We're moving across the ribbon here. This one here is a model summary report. This one here is available in your free license, but it only shows you every other row if you're on a trial. Sorry, so it's in your free and your trial. It only shows you every other row. This is one of those things that is locked directly to the pro license. We figure that if you're documenting your model with our tool, that we figure that you guys can pay us for that privilege because this saves you a ton of time. Basically what this does, it tells me exactly how many tables, relationships, measures, how much memory this is being used, where are my data sources coming from? Are they coming from Power Query or linked to external sources? When I go through, I can show you all of the relationships in this area. Are they active? Are they many to one? Now, if you know anything about Excel modeling, you know that we only support in Power Pivot for Excel many-to-one relationships. But there's another program called Power BI that supports one-to-one and many-to-many. Why did I add a column to show this then, right? So it's an interesting piece. We tell you some information about your model. We've got a disconnected table and a snowflake table in this particular model. What's a snowflake table? If you're not familiar with the dimensional modeling aspects, I can show you. Here is my disconnected table right here. It's all on its own. This guy here, this is a fact table for chit details. This is a dimension, and from the dimension, there's a many-to-one relationship feeding out the shifts. This table is completely unnecessary and could be flattened back into this to save myself a little bit of memory. Okay, so that's what a snowflake table is. That's the snowflake. So that's interesting information that I would want to clean up if I were building a professional model. I've got your table column stats here. Every column that you have, what's the data type? Because data types drive power pivot efficiency. How many unique values? These drive your compression levels. Are they visible or not? Have columns actually been hidden? Are they a calculated column? What's the actual DAX formula that's driving it? We can see all of our measures here. Are they explicit? Or are they implicit? There's an indirect. Is it used? Ooh, that's funky. Nope, not used at all. So we could probably delete that. And here's the DAX expression. Cool thing about this, just for reference, one of the people that's on the call here, Christian, asked for this little feature here. These guys are actually Excel tables, so we could actually turn on the filter button here. The reason this is important is if you actually do use the SQL BI DAX tools, you can actually click this and use their DAX formatter to show this in their own DAX formatting, just applying that. Now, I don't actually have that installed, but if I did, I could format that right away. So this is a nice little table format here. We also list all your queries. This one's also important because if you want to know where your data sources are inside this guy here, all you need to do is come down here and say, get rid of everything. Sorry, no, keep everything except for queries and blanks. And that shows me the data sources that are actually feeding into this workbook. So if I go and turn that off, though, what you'll see is that we've got all of our different queries here. This is the entire query lineage chain here as well that's being used. Now, this is cool stuff, but there's more that we can actually do with this. We actually have inside here a model memory usage report. So if you're trying to make your models more efficient, for your Excel models, I can tell you what's in use and what's recoverable. So if you go and take a look at the chit details table, we can actually see that everything is actually in use in this model. If I go and look at chit headers, it is. If I look at calendar, though, I've got some columns here that aren't being used. So I could go and remove those from the model. And if I want to see exactly what I can remove for an Excel model, I go straight to my unused items report. This actually comes back and tells me what columns are not being used, what measures are not being used, and it even tells me what power queries are not being used inside this model as well. So we actually look at all these things. I could go back and I could remove all these things without causing any issues. I would then rerun the report just to make sure that I haven't actually exposed any more orphans in there that I could actually get rid of as well. So it's just kind of some cool components around this. I'm going to show you this one more because I want to show you why we actually started even building this tool to begin with here. This file is going to take a little bit to open. This is actually based on a real-world consulting project that I did. This is what actually allowed me to survive my first year of business, actually, as a self-employed consultant. What I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to drive off to this sheet here. This shows you what we were doing. We were actually building a forecast for a housing development, and I'm going to show you what this actually looked like when we look at our spreadsheets. These were all input worksheets, lots of those. We fed these through Power Query to reshape the data to get it ready for Power Pivot so we could build our reports. And this is a hand-drawn flowchart that shows you all of the queries that we used. Everything in blue is a table, everything in green is a data model table, and all the little yellow or all the little circles are off-page connectors or on-page connectors that show you where these ones go. So this guy feeds into number 5, which shows up over here that goes into this one and might show up in other places. This took me forever to draw because we didn't have good lineage tools. So as a matter of fact, if we were to go into the Power Query editor, I'll show you what this query chain actually looks like using Microsoft's default view, which actually didn't exist when I built this. Okay, so this is the query dependencies chart for this particular model with Power Query. The problem with this is that I can zoom into it, but if I want to see what's going on with this one, I can click on it. You'll see that stuff goes everywhere, right? And I can't pull this out. It just moves the thing around. This view, when you get into a model this big, is useless. So what I did is this was actually the original, oh, shoot. Yeah, that figures. I clicked too slow because everything just lags on me just a tiny little bit. What I did is I wrote the Query Sleuth add-in or the Query Sleuth functionality specifically so that I could go and actually trace this particular query chain through, because my client would change things on me and it would change one of those cornerstone queries inside the model, and you go, holy cow, what's going to happen? So if I look, for example, at calendar, this one's not so bad. Categories, not so bad. Forecast, wow. You take a look at this guy here, look at all the queries that feed and stack through this whole thing. And this is why I also needed a dependency view, because I figure out where am I going to change it. It's going to be on this one here, for example. Let me switch this to dependence. If I had to change, say, this one, well, wow, that has the impact potentially of affecting a lot of things. So this is what this tool was originally built for, to sort of help out with different things. It's evolved over time. I'll show you the details on this particular model. So if I go and take a look at the model summary, if I were documenting, try and actually figure out what's going on with it. At that point in time, we'll see what we get back from the model report. And in the meantime, I'm going to answer Christian's question. Have I tried to copy all of these queries into data flows for Power BI to check the new view? No, I have not. Every time I try and copy some of these things in, I end up hitting a limitation on data views or data flows that actually ends up hurting me a little bit. So I haven't actually played with that. Let me show you what I've got here. Notice in my data sources, I've got a worksheet table. This is right inside the workbook. It's a disconnected table. That seems a little odd. I would go and investigate that. There's a lot of snowflakes in this model. I would investigate those as well. A lot of calculated columns. I'm embarrassed to say that I did this, but now I know. When I go back and I look at the measures, I can actually take a look. I believe that everything in this one, almost everything, was an implicit measure, but all of my implicit measures are not being used. So, I would go back and clean these up. These are all things that I discovered along the way. There's a couple of explicit measures that aren't being used as well. I'd get rid of those. And then I would go and hit my unused items report, and I'd go back and say, okay, show me all the things that I can clean up. All of these, including these queries. This is actually how I found out I wasn't even using some of these queries. There were so many I didn't know. So there we go. This now tells me a lot of information. So now I can go back, clean things up, and make sure things look a little bit better and cleaner. All right, I'm going to get rid of a couple things here, and then I'm going to show a last demo here as well on this stuff, and then we'll wrap this whole thing up and take a bunch more questions. So basically what I'm looking at here, if I get myself all the way back to a cleaner section, is I want to go and connect right now. We can connect to the active workbook, which I don't currently have one. You can connect to different workbooks and read from different workbooks as well. We also have the ability to connect to Power BI desktop files, except you need a workbook open to do that because it needs to land the data somewhere. So I'm going to go and pick up from my Monkey Tools add-in here. I'm going to go and grab some of my demo data. There we are, LP Azure SQL. So this is a Power BI file that's built against an Azure SQL database. And what I'm going to do is I'm just connecting to it right now. It's actually launching Power BI on the other window, which is why we appear to have gone into not responding mode, but just give it a minute to let it do its thing. It has to let Power BI load to a certain place before I can actually extract some information from this. It's now analyzing all its measures. I can see what's going on down in the bar down the bottom here, and then it should pop up with a nice little message to tell me the data model's been loaded. So what can I get out of it when the data model's been loaded? And then Power BI always comes up in front to obscure that message so you don't know what happened. I kind of wish that I could make that not happen, but hey. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to run a model summary report on this. Bingo, there you go. This is the model from the PBIX file. So this gives me all of the information that I've got that I know about at this particular case. For some reason, this one's telling me there's no measures defined in this model. I need to look at that. There might be something that's gone sideways on that. That seems a little strange. If I go and take a look at the memory usage report, I can tell you how much memory is being used. Unfortunately, at this point, this is one of the challenges that we actually have on this one, is that we have not gone through the work yet to actually examine all the Power BI visuals to see what's being used in this case for your measures. So we can't tell you what's not being used. That's something that is on our roadmap to do. But one of the things that is important that I can see here is that this file actually has a date table template in it. This means that I have a date table for some reason, even though I have my own calendar table. I don't want this, and I would go into Power BI and turn this off. This has been super, super useful for me working with one client. We ran this against his model, and what we actually found out is that 67% of the memory, a footprint for his model that was slowing things down, was on invisible date tables that he didn't know existed. We changed one thing in Power BI, saved the file, reattached to it. As I say, model was down to about 33% of the size. So that's a huge, huge factor and change on this. Query Sleuth, we can see the entire query chain. This is pulling from the SQL LP Azure SQL. And I'm a little bit curious to see what happens on this one, because this guy is supposed to be coming up. Abdullah, we seem to have introduced a bug in our DAX Sleuth for connecting to our Power BI models. We're going to need to look at that one, because this one usually pulls up our DAX Sleuth measures, and we can actually update and duplicate measures inside your Power BI model from here as well. So that's not awesome. I'm going to have to look back at that one. We must have caused that in the last couple of days. All right. And on that note, the only other thing that I would sort of point out on this one is that we've recently added a log a bug. So that's where you'd actually report things like that, and feature suggestions. There's a user guide, which is actually a little bit out of date, that I got to work on in 2 weeks. That is a whirlwind of monkey tools as far as how we can actually go and interact with Excel and with Power BI. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically, I think, Faraz, we can turn this back for questions around this kind of stuff, and see if anybody's got anything that they wanted to ask or talk about. I'm more than happy to field those.
Yeah, sure, Ken. Definitely. I'm just checking the YouTube chats. Didn't find any questions, but people, they are enjoying the session, what you have been showing them. And in fact, when I was giving a session in London Meetup, I got a lot of messages asking me, what is this tool that you are able to give that summary? And they were quite amazed with that one. And
yeah, we're proud of it. I mean, we've worked pretty hard on stuff there. I mean, a lot more than we want to add. You know, and this is why Abdullah's working with me on this thing here, is to try and get this into a place where we're able to deliver and all these things. I can't remember last time we looked at our list. I think we've got about, it feels like 100 features that we want to add. A lot of different things. We can't do everything we want because we don't have access to get to certain pieces inside the data models, but we're certainly curious to hear what other people think are the most valuable components along the way too. So,
any questions? If we have friends, feel free to ask. You can. So Ken is here, so he can answer you. By the way, these models are like when you are really working deep into data modeling, where you're connecting different data sources. That time, this tool is really handy. It gives you the path. It knows that where you are going, where the things are getting dragged, where you can improve the model, where some tables you don't need it, as Ken has showed that there are some kind of measures which we don't need it, which was just occupying unnecessary space in the memory. So you can clean the model so you can make your model build faster and efficient, and that's how it works.
Yeah, our big sort of thing that we're playing around with on these things is we're trying to, I sort of focus on two things. I mean, number one is obviously building things faster and trying to follow recommended practices as we go. The second thing is that I'm ridiculously jealous with the memory that I allow my models to use, because the less memory that's used inside the data model, the faster it will actually run and react when people are clicking on slicers and timelines and things like that. And one of the things that I have discovered amongst the users that I deal with is, if you make a user wait 10 minutes for a model to refresh, they will eventually get used to that if they have to. They may not like it, but they'll work with it. But if you make them wait 15 seconds when you click a slicer for the report to actually recalculate to show what goes on, then they actually will come back and say this model is unusable. And the reason it all has to do with the upfront loading of the data, if somebody knows it's going to take time, they'll actually schedule that into the day, click the button, walk down the hallway, get a coffee, talk to their coworkers, at least if we're not in a COVID world that we are right now on this one. But that's sort of the normal place. They can schedule for that. But if you're in a report and you're trying to actually click on, I want to see what the sales were for last month, you click your slicer and it waits. It's like, oh, come on, that's not good. As Christian just noticed in the chat as well, this is a different Power BI model that I've connected to. This one here is an EMF model, which is actually using the current enhanced metadata format. The one that I was using before was actually using an old model, and I'm going to have to look back into that because it should have picked up. But in this case here, you'll see that these are all the measures that are actually showing up inside the model here. And on this one, I've got a draft sold here. If I hop over to Power BI and I take a look at my metrics table here, you'll notice that I have a draft sold, but I don't have a canned beer. So here's the kind of the cool thing on this one too, is that I can take my draft sold, I can duplicate it, and I can call this one canned beer. I'll try and spell that correctly. And then basically at this point, I can come back and say I'm going to go and mark this one as canned beer, and I'm going to hit update on it. And if I hop back over to Power BI, you'll notice that I have canned beer sitting right here, and it is canned beer at this point in time. So we can actually write back to the Power BI model as well for these kind of things. So we're looking at these kind of fun different things to try and interact between these two programs, because there is so much similarity between these guys as to what's going on. So I should just make sure that I can actually run my model summary on this one. Boom, yeah, there it is. It looks good in this model well and whatnot. So yeah, we're trying to build tools that that bring business experience into what we're actually dealing with here. Again, helping people get off the ground faster. Debug things faster, document faster. Like that's really the main goal with what we have here. So hopefully you guys have found this enjoyable and interesting. And what I should probably do at this point here is I should probably go and throw you this set of links here, because if you're interested in more about this information, we do put out blog posts at excelguru.ca/blog on the new features that we actually have. And if you're interested in getting a free trial of the model or of the tool itself, or buying it, you can find the information on that at the link in the top right-hand corner. Full disclosure on this thing here. We have done some work recently on this where we believe that Monkey Tools is actually compatible to run on systems that use Excel in different languages. However, please download the free trial and check that before you go and put your credit card into the machine if you're interested in buying it. We want to know that it works. We definitely support English versions of Excel. We are trying to do what we can to support non-English versions of Excel, but we can't guarantee that at that point. So that's why there is a free trial. So please, give that a shot. I got another question for Christian. Is there a way to force the forms to show up in front of everything else when pushing a button in Monkey Tools? Because sometimes the form opens up in the back. Yeah, you've hit on one of our other bugbears, Christian. We're working on it. We're trying to figure it out, but it is turning out to be much more challenging. You'd think with a lot of this stuff that doing a lot of the intel around this would be the hard part. What we're actually finding is that the user interface mechanisms for doing things like resizing for high DPI screens, getting your form to actually show up in front when you click it, those ones take so much time to get right, and it's bizarre. You'd think that stuff would be simple. So we're trying, but right now, unfortunately, I can't confirm it. So it's driving me nuts. I'll tell you that. So.
And I'll be sharing the link, which is there, this Excelguru/Monkey Tools. I'll be sharing it in the video description also. So the friends, those who are watching, they can directly straight away get it. And in fact, even if you visit their website on Excel Exciting Resources section, we already have kept this Monkey tool, available, and you can get the free version as Ken has mentioned.
Awesome. Thank you, Faraz. I appreciate that.
Great. I think it was a wonderful session, Ken. Thank you again for giving your time. And it was really a valuable piece of information. It was been request coming a lot of time to me asking about the Monkey tool. So I thought it would be great that the person who has invented the Ken, so he himself come and demonstrate about the tool. That would be really great. And from some of the sessions, people were just amazed with the graphs, the performance graph, that just drives them crazy. And they were like, they just wanted to know that how can they get this tool. And so then I finally kept it on the site. And so for friends, you can get it and grab it from there. And if you have any concerns, anything, then you can write it to Ken. You can connect Ken on all this and let us know.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, if you do install and you find anything that's not working or whatnot, as I say, there's a bug report form right inside the thing as well, so you can get in touch with Abdullah and I to get those things done on that as well. So, and thanks for having me on this. I mean, I know you've been using this tool since the first version came out way back last year, and or I guess not last year, earlier in this year, and
Yes.
it's great to have the support for it. I mean, we're really proud and we're working really hard on it, and it's nice to know that people like what they're seeing. So we plan to keep on going with it. That's our goal. So
okay, so thank you guys. See you at the next meetup, and we'll be announcing it on the meetup page. So stay connected, and thank you, Ken.